What if I told you that one small act of kindness could rewrite your entire life? Daniel, a homeless man struggling to survive, gave his only coat and last bit of food to a pregnant woman in need. The next morning, a sleek limousine pulled up, and the woman, now transformed, came looking for him. Why, what did she want? And how did this one encounter change everything? Stay till the end, because this story will make you rethink the power of kindness. Welcome to a world of untold stories and shocking truths. Some secrets change lives forever, and this one just might. Let's begin. A cold wind howled through the empty streets as Daniel pulled his tattered coat tighter around his shoulders. The city never slept, but for people like him, forgotten by the world, it was just another endless night. He shuffled toward the park, his usual spot near a broken-down bench, hoping to find a little peace before the morning rush. That's when he heard it. Soft sobs carried through the air, blending with the rustling leaves and distant honks of impatient drivers. At first, Daniel thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him, but then, beneath the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, he saw her. A woman, no older than 30, sat hunched on the bench, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly, her face buried in trembling hands. Something about the way she cried, silent, yet completely shattered, sent a pang through Daniel's chest. He knew that kind of pain, the kind where you feel like the world has swallowed you whole, leaving you with nothing but an unbearable weight pressing down on your soul. He hesitated. Most people avoided him. He was used to it. The way strangers crossed the street when they saw him, the way shop owners scowled if he lingered too long near their doors. He wasn't sure if this woman would want his help, but he couldn't just walk away. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Miss..." His voice was rough from years of cold nights and little food. "Are you okay?" the woman gasped, jerking upright, her eyes, puffy and red, locked onto his. For a moment, fear flashed across her face, and Daniel braced himself for the usual reaction. She would probably tell him to leave or, worse, scream for help, but she didn't. Instead, she wiped at her cheeks, sniffling. I don't know what to do," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to appear. When no one did, she exhaled shakily. "My name is Olivia," she said. Her voice broke and she shook her head. "I don't have anywhere to go." Daniel knew what that felt like. Without a word, he shrugged off his coat. It was old, frayed at the edges, and barely enough to keep out the cold, but it was all he had. Gently, he draped it over Olivia's shoulders. She blinked in surprise. "I can't..." "It's okay," he interrupted. "You need it more than I do." Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they weren't just from sadness. There was something else there, something Daniel hadn't seen directed at him in a long time. Gratitude. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly crushed granola bar, the last of his food. He handed it to her without a second thought. "Eat," he said simply. Olivia hesitated before taking it. She broke off a piece and chewed slowly, as if every bite was an effort. For the next few minutes, they sat in silence. The city bustled around them, but in that moment it felt like it was just the two of them, two lost souls sharing a quiet, fragile connection. After a while, Olivia spoke. "I left my home tonight," she admitted. "I had to." Daniel didn't press her for details. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of whatever she was running from. "You'll be okay," he said instead. "Whatever happened, you'll find a way." She let out a bitter chuckle. "You really think so?" Daniel gave her a small, knowing smile. "I've been through worse, and I'm still here." That seemed to strike something in Olivia. She wiped at her face again, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know you, and yet..." She trailed off, shaking her head. Daniel just nodded. He wasn't looking for thanks, he just wanted her to be okay. As the night wore on, Olivia grew drowsy. Daniel sat beside her, keeping watch, making sure she was safe. By morning, she was gone. Daniel wasn't surprised. People always left. He just hoped she was somewhere warm, somewhere safe. With a sigh, he stood, stretching his stiff limbs. Another day of searching for food, finding shelter, surviving. He had long accepted that this was his life. But then, something unexpected happened. As he turned to leave the park, the unmistakable sound of tires rolling to a stop caught his attention. He glanced up just in time to see a sleek black limousine pulling up to the curb near the shelter. Daniel frowned. Limos didn't come to places like this. The driver stepped out, adjusting his hat. He scanned the area, then cleared his throat. "I'm looking for a man named Daniel." Daniel's heart pounded. He had no idea what was happening, but he was about to find out. Daniel stood frozen as the driver's voice echoed in the cold morning air. A limousine looking for him? That made no sense. He instinctively glanced around, half expecting someone else to step forward. Maybe there was another Daniel here, someone who belonged in a world of black-tinted windows and luxury. But no one moved. The few people lingering near the shelter, men and women huddled in ragged layers, stared at the limo in the same disbelief he felt. The driver, a tall man in a crisp suit, adjusted his hat and spoke again. "I was given instructions to find a man named Daniel. He should be around this area." Daniel swallowed. His mind raced. Had he done something wrong? Was this some kind of setup? It wasn't like he had anything valuable, and the only trouble he ever caused was existing where people didn't want to see him. Then, as if on cue, the back door of the limousine opened, and out stepped Olivia. She looked different from the woman he had met the night before. Instead of being wrapped in his tattered coat, she now wore a warm wool jacket over her shoulders. Her hair was neatly brushed, her face brighter, though her eyes still carried a weight of something unspoken. She spotted him instantly. "Daniel!" The shock of hearing his name from her lips made him take a step back. He wasn't used to being recognized, let alone by someone who had vanished without a word. The driver turned toward her. "Miss Olivia, is this him?" She nodded. "Yes, this is Daniel." Daniel's voice came out rough. What's going on?" She smiled, soft but filled with something that almost looked like relief. "Get in, please." Daniel hesitated. He glanced down at himself, at his worn-out shoes and dirt-streaked hands. He didn't belong in a limousine. He belonged out, here where people barely looked at him. I don't think I owe you," Olivia cut in gently. "More than you know. Just trust me." Daniel still didn't understand, but something in her voice made it hard to refuse. With slow, uncertain steps, he followed her to the car. The driver opened the door wider, and Daniel hesitated for only a second before climbing inside. The interior was nothing like anything he had ever experienced. Smooth leather seats, a scent of something expensive lingering in the air. It was the kind of place that felt untouched by the struggles of the world outside. The door shut behind him. And just like that, his life changed. The ride was silent for a few minutes. Daniel felt out of place, like an intruder in a world where he didn't belong. He kept his hands on his lap, afraid to touch anything, afraid to move too much. Olivia, sitting beside him, finally broke the silence. "I want to explain everything," she said softly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to. You don't owe me anything." She turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, I do." A lump formed in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing those words. Olivia took a deep breath. "I wasn't just some random woman in the park last night. I was—" She paused, as if searching for the right words. "I was running away." Daniel frowned. "From what?" She hesitated before answering. "My family." That wasn't the answer he expected. "I come from, let's just say, a very powerful family," she continued. "The kind that believes in appearances, in control. When they found out I was pregnant, they weren't happy." She swallowed hard. "I was supposed to marry someone they approved of, but the father of my baby wasn't. He wasn't part of their plan." Daniel stayed quiet, letting her talk. "I tried to fight them. I told them it was my life, my baby, but they didn't care. They cut me off, took away everything, my money, my home, my security. I had nothing." She exhaled shakily. "Last night when you found me, I was at my lowest. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to." She turned to him, eyes filled with emotion. And then you showed up. Daniel clenched his jaw. He didn't see what he had done as extraordinary. He had just helped because that's what people were supposed to do, right? You gave me your coat, your last bit of food. And you didn't even know me. Olivia's voice trembled. I don't think you understand how much that meant. Daniel looked away, embarrassed. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing, she insisted. It was everything. Silence stretched between them again. Then Olivia took a deep breath. After I left the park, I went to someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, someone I trusted. She helped me get back on my feet, and this morning when I woke up, all I could think about was you. Daniel blinked. Me, she nodded. I couldn't just leave you there. Not after what you did for me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He had been surviving on his own for so long that the idea of someone actually caring, really caring, felt foreign. The limousine slowed. Daniel glanced out the window, his breath catching in his throat. They had stopped in front of a hotel. But not just any hotel. It was one of the most expensive places in the city, the kind of place where people like him weren't even allowed near the entrance. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Olivia turned to him. Come inside with me, please. Daniel hesitated. This felt like a dream, one he was sure would shatter the moment he stepped out. But something in Olivia's eyes told him that this time, maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't. Daniel hesitated. At the threshold of the luxurious hotel, the grand entrance loomed before him, its golden doors gleaming under the soft morning light. People in expensive suits and designer dresses walked in and out, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floors. This wasn't his world. He glanced down at his own reflection in the glass door, disheveled hair, worn-out clothes, shoes, with holes in them. He didn't belong here. Olivia must have sensed his hesitation because she reached for his arm. You don't have to be afraid, she said gently. You're with me. But Daniel wasn't afraid. He was just out of place. Still, he took a deep breath and followed her inside. The moment he stepped through the doors, everything felt surreal. The warmth of the hotel embraced him, replacing the biting cold of the streets. Chandeliers hung overhead, their crystal prisms casting tiny rainbows across the polished floors. A scent of fresh flowers and expensive cologne lingered in the air. Daniel kept his head down as they walked past the concierge desk, expecting someone to stop him at any moment. Any second now, a security guard would grab his arm and demand to know what a man like him was doing here, but no one did. Instead, Olivia led him straight to the elevator. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and they stepped inside. As the elevator ascended, Daniel finally found his voice. Why are we here? Olivia glanced at him, her lips pressing together in thought. Then, just as the doors opened, she said, Because I want to help you the way you helped me. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She stepped out, motioning for him to follow. The hallway was lined with pristine white walls and elegant gold accents. At the very end, Olivia stopped in front of a door and swiped a key card. The lock clicked, and she pushed the door open. Daniel stepped inside cautiously. The suite was bigger than anything he had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the city. A plush king-size bed sat in the center, its crisp white sheets untouched. To the side, a tray of fresh fruit and a steaming pot of coffee waited on a glass table. This, Daniel shook his head. This isn't for me. Olivia smiled softly. It is now. His heart pounded. I don't understand. She took a deep breath. Last night you gave me your last piece of food, Daniel. Your only coat. You, a man with nothing, still chose to give. Her eyes glistened with emotion. No one has ever done something like that for me before. Daniel swallowed hard. I've had money my whole life, Olivia continued. But last night I realized how worthless it was when I had no one to turn to. No one except you. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. You don't owe me anything. She shook her head. This isn't about owing you, it's about doing what's right. He looked away, his fists clenching at his sides. People like me, we don't get second chances. We don't get help. Olivia stepped closer. Then let me be the first person to prove you wrong. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Olivia smiled. Just stay here tonight. Rest, get cleaned. Then we'll talk. He hesitated, but exhaustion weighed heavily on his bones. A bed, an actual bed, he hadn't slept in one for years. Okay, he whispered. Olivia beamed. Good. She grabbed a hotel phone and pressed a button. I've arranged for new clothes to be sent up, and a hot meal. Daniel's throat tightened. No one had ever done something like this for him. As Olivia turned to leave, she paused at the door. By the way, I never asked, how did you end up homeless? Daniel's jaw tightened. It's a long story. Olivia nodded. Then we'll talk when you're ready. And with that, she was gone. Daniel stood in the middle of the suite, feeling like a stranger in his own life. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he dared to hope. The door clicked shut behind Olivia, leaving Daniel alone in the vast, luxurious suite. He stood frozen for a moment, still struggling to believe any of this was real. The bed, the food, the warm air that replaced the biting chill he had grown used to. Slowly, he walked toward the bathroom, catching his reflection in the mirror above the sink. He barely recognized himself. Sunken eyes, stubble covering his jaw, dirt smudged across his face. He looked like a man who had fought one too many battles with life and lost every single one. A knock at the door made him jump. Room service, a voice called from the other side. Daniel hesitated before opening the door. A hotel employee, dressed in a crisp uniform, wheeled in a silver cart topped with a steaming plate of food. The rich aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the room. The man didn't look at Daniel with disgust or pity, just polite professionalism. Your meal is ready, sir, and a fresh set of clothes has been delivered as well. Sir Daniel couldn't remember the last time anyone had addressed him with respect. Thanks, he muttered. The man nodded and left without another word. Daniel turned to the food, his stomach twisting in hunger. It had been so long since he'd had a real meal, something warm, something that didn't come from a dumpster or a charity line. He sat down and picked up the fork, hesitating for just a second before taking the first bite. It was heaven. Each mouthful felt like a reminder of the life he once had, before everything fell apart. Before he lost his job, before the debts piled up, before the world forgot about him. As he ate, his eyes wandered to the neatly folded clothes on the chair. A pair of dark slacks, a button-down shirt, and even a set of new shoes. All in his size. He didn't know how Olivia had managed that so quickly. A hot shower later, Daniel stood in front of the mirror again. The man staring back at him still looked rough around the edges, but the difference was undeniable. Clean clothes, a fresh shave, damp hair that curled slightly at the ends. He didn't look like a man who had been living on the streets. He looked normal, and that terrified him, because normal was something he had lost long ago. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "It's me," Olivia's voice called. Daniel opened the door, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes he hadn't before. Relief. "You look—" She hesitated, a small smile playing on her lips. "Different." Daniel huffed a quiet laugh. "Guess a shower and some food will do that to a guy." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning him as if seeing him in a new light. "I'm glad you're here." He shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. "I still don't know why I'm here." Olivia's expression turned serious. "Because I have a proposition for you," Daniel frowned. "A proposition?" She nodded. "You helped me when I had no one. Now I want to help you." Daniel crossed his arms. "By giving me a fancy hotel room and new clothes?" Olivia shook her head. "By giving you a chance." He didn't respond, so she continued. "I come from a wealthy family, Daniel, but I don't want their money. I want to build something on my own. And after last night, I realized something." "What?" "That you're the kind of person who deserves a second chance." Daniel's throat tightened. "Olivia, I'm not offering charity," she said firmly. I'm offering a job. His eyes widened. A job? She nodded. I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows what it's like to start from nothing and fight their way back. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. You don't even know me. I know enough. Silence stretched between them. Daniel wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust that this wasn't just some temporary kindness, that she wouldn't wake up tomorrow and change her mind, like so many others had before. But trust was something he had lost a long time ago. Still, he had nothing left to lose. What kind of job? He finally asked. Olivia's lips curled into a smile. Come with me and I'll show you. Daniel followed Olivia out of the hotel suite, still unsure whether this was all a dream he would wake up from at any moment. The elevator ride down was silent, but Olivia's expression was calm, almost excited. He, on the other hand, felt like he was walking into something far bigger than he could understand. A job. It had been years since he even thought about working. Back when he had a stable life, a small apartment, and a future that didn't seem so impossible. But that was before everything collapsed, before he lost everything. Now, standing next to Olivia, dressed in borrowed clothes and walking through a world that had long since forgotten him, he wasn't sure if he could do this. As they stepped outside, Daniel blinked against the bright morning light. The limousine was still parked at the curb, waiting. Where are we going? He asked hesitantly. Olivia smiled. Somewhere that might change your life. Daniel sighed, but climbed into the limo after her. The doors shut, sealing him inside, once more. The car smoothly pulled away from the hotel, merging into the city's bustling streets. Daniel glanced at Olivia. You still haven't told me what kind of job this is. She chuckled. Because I want you to see it for yourself. That didn't exactly ease his nerves. The car wove through the city, passing towering skyscrapers and sleek office buildings before finally slowing in front of a large modern structure with reflective glass windows. The building looked important, too important for someone like him to be walking into. The limo stopped, and the driver opened the door for them. Olivia stepped out confidently, and after a moment of hesitation, Daniel followed. As they walked, inside, the cool air conditioning hit him immediately. The lobby was sleek and sophisticated, filled with well-dressed professionals moving with purpose. Daniel felt like an imposter just standing there. Olivia led him toward the elevators, pressing the button for the top floor. I work here, she said, as the doors slid shut. Daniel glanced at her, startled. Here, she nodded. Like I told you, I walked away from my family's money. I wanted to prove I could build something on my own. This, she gestured around them, is my company. Daniel blinked. He hadn't expected that. The elevator dinged and the doors opened to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A sleek desk sat at the far end of the room, and a few employees milled about, glancing curiously at Daniel as Olivia led him inside. She turned to face him. I want you to work for me, Daniel, he scoffed. Doing what? I don't know anything about businesses or offices. She smiled knowingly. You know more than you think. You understand people. You understand struggle. You've survived things most people in this building wouldn't last a week dealing with. Daniel shook his head. That doesn't mean I belong here. But you do, Olivia insisted. I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't. Just tell me what I want to hear. Someone who sees the world differently. Daniel crossed his arms. You think I can just put on a suit and become someone else? No, Olivia said. I think you can put on a suit and finally be who you were always meant to be. Silence filled the room. Daniel wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell her she was crazy, that he wasn't built for this life anymore. But deep down, something inside him ached at the possibility. A job. A real job. A second chance. Finally, he exhaled. What exactly would I be doing? Olivia grinned. We'll figure that out together. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. Daniel sat stiffly in the plush leather chair across from Olivia's desk, his hands clasped together as he tried to process everything. He had gone. From sleeping on a park bench to sitting in the office of a woman who ran her own company. within the span of 24 hours. It didn't feel real. Olivia leaned forward, her elbows resting on the polished surface of her desk. "I know this is a lot," she admitted, "and I don't expect you to make a decision right now, but I meant what I said. I want you to work here." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Doing what, though? I don't have a degree. I don't know business strategies or marketing or whatever it is you do here." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "What I do here is build solutions, and I need people who understand real problems. That's where you come in." He frowned. "I don't follow." She leaned back in her chair, considering her words. "I've been working on a new initiative, something that could actually help people who've been overlooked by society. People like you." Daniel tensed slightly. He hated that phrase. People like you. It made it sound like he belonged in a separate category, one that people pitied but never truly understood. Sensing his discomfort, Olivia softened her tone. "I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that you've lived a life most people in this building wouldn't last a day in. You know what it's like to struggle, to lose everything, to fight just to make it through another night." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. She continued, "I want to create a program to help people get back on their feet. Real, practical help, not just handing out food or blankets, but actual resources to rebuild their lives. Jobs, housing, mentorship. But to do that, I need someone who knows what it's really like out there. Someone who can tell me what works and what doesn't." Daniel stared at her, trying to find the catch. "And you think I'm that person?" "I know you are," Olivia said confidently. Daniel leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. This was insane. He had been homeless for years, forgotten by the world. And now suddenly someone believed in him, trusted him to help build something. It felt too good to be true. "What if I mess up?" he muttered. Olivia smiled. "Then you'll learn. Just like everyone else." He shook his head. "I don't know anything about running a program." "Then we'll figure it out together," she said simply. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to be willing to try." Daniel hesitated. Every instinct in him screamed to walk away, to run before this turned into another disappointment. But there was another part of him, the part that had dreamed long ago of something better, that wanted to say yes. Because what if this wasn't just another letdown? What if this was his chance? Finally, he took a deep breath and met Olivia's gaze. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll try." A slow smile spread across her face. "Good. Then let's get to work." The next few days passed in a blur. Daniel had expected Olivia to change her mind, to wake up one morning and realize she'd made a mistake in offering a homeless man a job. But she never did. Instead, she threw him straight into the deep end. She introduced him to her team, most of whom gave him curious but polite smiles, clearly wondering who he was and why he was suddenly involved in high-level meetings. Olivia never explained. She simply treated him like he belonged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At first, Daniel kept to himself. He listened more than he spoke, observing the way the company operated. It was a different world from the one he was used to. The people here walked with confidence, their hands tapping away at sleek laptops, discussing projects and deadlines. He felt like an outsider. But then, something unexpected happened. During a meeting about Olivia's new initiative, one of the managers, a sharp-dressed man named Jason, spoke up. "We've looked into different housing programs," Jason said, flipping through a report. "Most shelters offer temporary relief, but nothing long-term. We could invest in transitional housing, but the issue is cost and sustainability." Daniel had no intention of speaking. He wasn't even sure why he was in the meeting in the first place, but something about Jason's words made him frown. "That won't work," Daniel muttered, before he could stop himself. Silence fell across the room. Every eye turned to him. Jason arched a brow. "Excuse me?" Daniel hesitated, feeling his pulse quicken. He wasn't supposed to be talking. He wasn't like them, educated, professional. But Olivia was watching him with quiet encouragement, waiting. So he took a breath and spoke. "You can't just put people in housing and expect them to be okay," he said. "I've seen it happen. A guy gets off the streets, gets a roof over his head for a few months, but then what? No job, no skills, no support system. So when the program ends, he's right back where he started." Jason pursed his lips. "So what do you suggest?" Daniel shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of how underdressed he was compared to everyone else. "You need more than housing. You need jobs, training, mentorship, something that actually helps people stand on their own." A murmur went around. "The table," Olivia smiled. "Go on." Daniel exhaled. "The problem isn't just homelessness. It's hopelessness. People don't just need a place to stay, they need a reason to believe they can actually make it." The room fell silent again. Jason tapped his pen against the table. "He's got a point." One of the other executives nodded slowly. "Yeah, we've been looking at this from a logistics standpoint, but he's right. If we don't create an actual path forward, we're just delaying the problem, not solving it." Daniel felt a strange sensation in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. For the first time, someone had listened to him, really listened. And it mattered. Olivia turned to him. "Looks like we found your first assignment." Daniel blinked. "What?" She grinned. "Congratulations. You're officially part of the team." The rest of the team chuckled, but Daniel just sat there, stunned. He was part of something now, and for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. Days turned into weeks, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel had a reason to wake up in the morning. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like he was learning how to live all over again, how to be part of something bigger than just survival. He had a desk now, a place where he could sit without worrying about being told to leave. He had meals that didn't come from a shelter or a dumpster. He had conversations that weren't just about making it through the night. Most of all, he had a purpose. At first, the transition was awkward. The other employees were polite but cautious, unsure how to interact. With him, Daniel understood. He had lived on the other side of society for so long that stepping into this world felt like wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. But Olivia never treated him like he was out of place. She included him in meetings, asked for his opinions, made sure his voice was heard. And little by little others started to do the same. One afternoon, as he sat in his office, Olivia walked in holding a folder. "We have our first group," she said, setting the folder on his desk. Daniel opened it, scanning the names and stories. People who had been just like him, forgotten, struggling, fighting to stay afloat. "This is real," he muttered. Olivia smiled. "It is." A lump formed in his throat. "How do we start?" She sat down across from him. "You tell me." Daniel exhaled, leaning back in his chair. He had spent years being invisible, convinced that no one cared, that he would never be anything more than a man people walked past on the street. But now, here he was, building something that mattered. "You know," Olivia said softly, "that night in the park, you thought you were just helping a stranger. But you weren't. You were helping me realize that I wanted to do something meaningful with my life." Daniel swallowed hard. "You saved me too," she added. He chuckled, shaking his head. "I just gave you a coat and some food." She smiled. "And I just gave you a job. Funny how life works, isn't it?" Daniel let out a slow breath, staring down at the folder in front of him. A year ago, he had nothing. Now, he had a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support. It truly helps me bring more impactful stories to you. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more emotional, thought-provoking tales. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Comment below and share. What part of the story touched you most, or how it made you feel? Your feedback means the world and shapes the future of the channel. Thank you for being part of this community.